Hey there, welcome back to Coding at Home with the Code Hub. Hi, I'm Matt with the Code Hub. Welcome back. We are on the day of WWDC. We've got the big keynote coming up later today. We've got the platform State of the Union, maybe a little bit later for some of us at 10 o'clock here in Ireland. Where they'll be talking about all the different goodies and frameworks that we'll be able to play with, improvements to Reality Kit, to AR Kit, to Swift Playgrounds, hopefully. You might have your own wish list after having programmed for the last few weeks of what you'd like to see. I know I'll be watching. Hopefully you'll watch too. If not tonight, then tomorrow. The keynote is at 6 p.m. tonight. If you go to developer.apple.com, you'll be able to find your way to it in the live stream. Today, for our purposes, while we're getting all excited about what they're going to talk about tonight, we'll be playing around a little bit more with augmented reality and taking advantage of some really cool code that they've written in this augmented reality playground. We'll be looking a little bit more at proximity to the camera. So when we move our camera around and we approach the objects that we've placed in reality, we have some functions that we can implement that will let us know when we're within so much of a distance of that object, and we can have it do certain things. So let's get over to the iPad and we'll play around with that now. All right, so here we go. Again, as we have been for so long, we're going to play with Swift Playgrounds. So we're going to open up Swift Playgrounds. I already have my augmented reality playground downloaded. We've been going through this the last few sessions. We've been working through it. If you're just joining us, you can always go back over and watch some of the other sessions. And you can also see where to get it from is just go to See All at the bottom of your Swift Playgrounds. And it's going to be in the challenges section. There's this augmented reality playground in the challenges section. We're also going to, once we finish with this, we're going to look at this AR Create playground. It's a little bit like the Swift at Home playground that we were playing with when we were building our own app at home. So just after we finished Lights Camera Code, we went into something that was a little bit like this Camera Create, and it let us take advantage of some of the things that have been built for us in that playground, like connecting up buttons and placing things in a scene. We're going to do the same thing with this AR Create blank playground. But that's in the future. Right now, we're going to go back to my playgrounds, and I'm going to open up my augmented reality playground. All right, so we left off here, and you can see, oh, I've got an error. What did I do last? I gave you a challenge. So we had this on start handler. So when someone presses that start scene button, we have the rain cloud animate with a bit of rain coming down. And then our task here was to add an action to the rain cloud to move to the snail's location. And my challenge for you was to create a scene so that the snail would actually run away after the rain cloud moved to it. So let's see what we can do there. So right now we've got this snail.run action set up. We've got our rain cloud model, our snail model, and our lemon model. So here, let's check it out and see what's happening. Now, I can't run this just yet because there's an error. So I'm going to actually go to the front of snail.run, and I'm going to comment that out. So the way we comment that out is we go down to this up arrow here. We bring up the keyboard, and we use these slashes to comment things out. So we use 2 of them. And you notice that my code just turned green. Swift is now going to ignore that line completely. I could write whatever I like in there, and Swift is not going to run that particular code. So I'll hide the keyboard again. I'm going to hit run my code just to see what that looks like. Okay, augmented reality would like access to the camera. We'll move it around. We've detected a spot. All right, so we've got our cloud. We'll place it over there. We'll place the snail over there on those cables. We've also got a lemon, because if you look here, we added a lemon to the scene in this array. And we know that it's an array because it's a bunch of variables separated by spaces and surrounded by square brackets. So those square brackets tell Swift, hey, this is an array. This is a list of items. They're all of a certain type. So they all share this, imaginary node we found on the previous page. That's the sort of common ancestor if we're talking about their superclass. So let's add our lemon as well. We'll add the lemon in between the two. And now I have an option to start the scene. So if I start the scene, we'll start our rain animation and we zip over to the snail. It went pretty fast because we have it do it within a second. We could make it be a little bit more leisurely and say, let's take 5 seconds. Oop, it'd help if I actually press the 5. There we go. Now let's run our code just so we can watch that. In slow motion, we'll recognize surface, put the snail over there again, put the lemon in between, maybe a bit further back. When we start the scene, there we go. It's going to take 5 seconds to get over to the snail. Now what we want to do is we want to have the snail move. So we can do that by running an action. If we stop that, I'm going to uncomment this out. So the way I can do that is I can tap just here between that slash and the S. That might be kind of hard to hit like it was for me just there. Because now if I hit delete, I'm going to delete my S, which is fine. I'll hit the delete key again, delete key again. I have to type in the S to bring back my snail reference. So now to get the snail to move, we saw a few different actions we could use. I just placed my cursor after the dot. And in fact, it might be easier if we say, do you know what, let's get rid of this code altogether here. So now we want our snail to run a certain command. So we're going to pick this run action from the autocomplete bar. And hit run. Now, when it's looking for a built-in action for me to run, I can use any one of these, but I'm going to pick the dot. And now it gives me a few pre-built actions. Fade to, move by, move to, rotate by, and scale to. Well, I'd like my snail to move. So let's do this. Let's do move by. And now this is where we're going to be playing around with our 3D grid a little bit. Remember, we have the X, Y, Z axis. That's right, Aaron, Neve, I said Z. We won't have it move at all on the X axis, which would be this way. I'm not going to have my snail move up and down because that would be crazy to have a floating snail. But I'll have it move towards me, maybe. So I'm thinking, I can't remember if it's positive or negative towards me. So let's try negative. Let's have him move maybe 50 pixels. So a decent amount. And it's the snail, so we won't have him do it crazy fast. We'll have him maybe take 10 seconds to do that. So let's try running this code. So now we have our rain cloud is moving to the snail's location. And then we also have the snail running an action, which is move by -50 on the Z axis. And we'll see which way that moves the snail. Let's hit run. We're going to detect the surfaces, place the cloud maybe over by the T. The snail will be over there by the wall, and the lemon, we can probably get rid of this lemon, but we'll leave the lemon over there. And now when we start the scene, there goes the cloud, and I don't see the snail. Because remember, when we run these actions, they actually run at the same time. So let's stop this. And what happened though was the rain cloud is moving to the snail's location. It took a snapshot of that snail's location at the very start. So the snail was over there. So when it animated, it was moving just towards that snail's location. And then we did snail run, and then we moved it -50. Maybe that's too far. Let's try doing -5. So let's hit run my code. Because -50, I think the snail shot right through me. So here we go. We're going to place the cloud over there. Place the snail over there. Lemon there. That's not going to do anything. We'll hit start. There it goes. All right, well. It's pretty far, actually, for the snail, just for -5. So now we've seen that -50 must have been crazy far away. So let's change this. It's instead of -5, we'll actually have it go 1 or maybe 1.5 on the z-axis. I'll have it take 10 seconds to do it. Let's hit run. All right, we're going to place the cloud over there. Place the snail over there. Drop the lemon. Now that we have all of our items placed, we'll hit start. There goes the snail. Still a bit far. And there goes the cloud. All right, let's fix that. So we'll do 0.25 and see if that helps. All right, we've recognized the surface, drop the cloud, drop the snail, drop the lemon, hit start. There we go. The snail is slowly moving towards us. Okay, and it stops right there. All right, that's a quarter of a meter. Maybe we're talking in meters here. Okay, so let's now that we have the snail move away from the cloud so it doesn't get wet. Let's write some code so that the cloud tries to follow up and tries to chase the snail. Well, we might wind up using a while loop here, so we can keep looping through, run this action, and then run the snail's action, and then come back up and get the snail's latest location. That might be one way to do it. Let's try it. This might not work. We'll give it a shot. So while, and we'll have this always repeat. So we'll just say while true. So that means that when Swift evaluates this condition here, true, it's always going to be true, so it's always going to try to run the code inside this loop. So let's hide this thing. I'm going to tap on the bottom of this brace and then drag down. So now my code's inside this while loop. So what I would expect to have happen here would be we'd come in here, we'd tell the rain cloud to run this action. It would move to the snail's location and take 5 seconds to do it. We then would run the snail action to move by 0.25 meters towards me and take 10 seconds. And then it would go do it all again. Let's try this out. So we're going to hit run my code. We'll detect some surfaces. We'll drop the cloud behind the coffee cup. Drop the snail there. Drop the lemon over here out of the way. All right, and here we go. We'll start the scene. Ooh, and we had a crash. Let's see what happened. Okay, so it's just telling us there's a problem while running this playground. Check our code for mistakes. Now we might not be able to do this because this code here is going to get run. If they get run at the same time, that means that it's kind of jumping outside of this loop a little bit. So maybe we won't be able to build a rain cloud permanently chasing a snail, which is probably good for the snail anyway. So let's remove this. I'm going to remove this while loop just by deleting while true in that first bracket, and then I have to delete the bottom one as well because that matches it. So it looks like we can't do that have the snail chase the rain cloud, at least not easily. If we tap on this, we'll see that there's just a problem running our playground. If we run it again, now that we've removed that, we should be just fine. There's our snail, put our lemon over there, hit start scene, there it goes. So if we wanted the rain cloud to keep following the snail, we could maybe run another one after this. But we're actually going to get, because this is animating, animation brings some special challenges to your code where you do a bunch more jumping around than you do even with functions and for loops. You know, we talked about in that learning how to read code, all about how you go through the code and you say, all right, cool, I'm going to read this line, this line, this line. I'm going to do scene add. So I jump into some other function on the scene type. I add my properties to the scene and I can place them. And then I have this other function here that gets called at a certain point when I press a button. So this is in reaction to someone doing something. We start to jump around a lot more when we're reading our code. It gets a little bit more difficult. We're going to see, not on the next page, but the page after that, how to read some of that code, and then also how to set up some code that will run when another action completes. They're called completion handlers. So let's go on to the next page. We'll go up to using actions. We're going to pick distance events next. So you can see there's our completion handlers page. All right, so this page here is all about triggering an event when we get close to a model. So it says here, distant event is a notification that your iPad can send you when the physical location of your iPad gets a certain distance away from a model in our scene. So this is how it's done here. So we can access this camera property, and we wire up our code to do something when we get within a certain distance by using this .when property on our camera. And we can feed it an object. So in this case, we're feeding it a moth variable is within 5 centimeters. Well, you can kind of guess how far away you're going to be from the object. And then we have this do, and then we write our code to run. Now this is fairly advanced syntax here, but it's a little bit easier to read maybe than it might have been. We could have done this in a very complex way. This actually makes it fairly readable because you can understand that, okay, well, yeah, I can kind of guess that, all right, when the camera is within 5 centimeters of the moth, I can run a certain amount of code. So let's create our own distance event. And now it says to use the speak API to make the moth say something. I'm not going to do that because I don't have audio turned on here. But so I'll have a moth as my flying bug model. I add the moth to the scene. I have my set on start handler and I animate the moth. Let's create our distance event down here. So to create a distance event, we get a hold of the scene. So we're going to say scene dot. Well, we have these add options here. We have apply color. Interesting. Set on start handler. And then we have a camera property way at the end of our autocomplete bar. So I'm going to tap on that one. Now I need to access a property on the camera. So I need to hit the dot. And I have these here. I can have the camera speak something. I can get its location, have it disappear. And then there's this, at the very end, there's this when function. That's got a whole bunch of crazy stuff after it. So let's tap on that. All right, so it's telling us that the first thing is an object. It's an imaginary node. So it's one of our models. It could be a lemon. It could be a moth. It could be a foot, what have you. All right, we're going to pick moth because we have a variable for that up here. So when it's within, we'll say we'll get up super close. Well, we'll do the same. We'll do 5 centimeters. So autocomplete will give me a dot. And this is really handy. Now I can specify whether 5 is centimeters, meters, or millimeters. So we'll do centimeters because we're just working in close on our desk here. And now when I tap on this thing here, this looks a little bit wild. This open parentheses, another open parentheses, a closed parentheses, an arrow looking thing, void, and then a closed one. This is just a block that we can add here to run our code in. So if you remember when we talked about blocks and we talked about reading code, we use the curly braces for that. So I'm going to go to the F key, tap on it and drag down to the right. And it inserts both for me. And if I hit return, it even indents my code for me. So it makes it a little easier for me to read. Now we have to have the scene do something when we get within 5 centimeters. So what are we going to have it do? So when we get close to the moth, what we'll do, I guess, is maybe have the moth animate in a different way. So the moth is animating already and flapping its wings. Let's have the moth do something else. So we'll say moth dot. Let's try animate and see if there's any interesting. Well, the only animation option we have to us is flap, which isn't very interesting because it'll just keep doing the same thing. But we can use this empty animate method that'll do the default one. And as we've seen, that means that the model scales up, it gets a bit bigger, and then it shrinks back down, and then it spins. So that's how we will tell if we got close enough to the moth. So all of our code looks like this. So we say scene.camera.when. That's going to get sent to us when we get within 5 centimeters. We're going to have the moth animate. So let's try this. All right, there's our desk. We're going to tap anywhere to place. We'll place it a little bit away from us. Okay, and now we'll hit start scene. All right, there it is. It's flapping for us. I'm going to get rid of this. Congratulations. And as we get a bit closer, I'm not within 5 centimeters yet. Well, that one didn't seem to work for me because it's still just flapping. So maybe we can't have it flap. So tell you what, let's try just to make sure that it's working. That when we are getting that close, it's doing something. Let's have the moth run an action. So I'm going to go over here. Or actually, you know what? Even easier. Let's try this disappear function. We haven't used this method yet. And remember, when I say function and method interchangeably, a method is just a function defined on a type. And our type in this case is this flying bug type of model. So let's hit run my code. There we go. We're going to place the butterfly over there, moth. Not only am I using programming words interchangeably, I'm also calling the moth something else. Oh, all right, so that works. So maybe using animate again when we're already animating with the flap method doesn't work the way this framework is set up. But disappear did, so I can probably take this line of code out because this isn't really doing anything. Now, I might add something else. Say, all right, well, instead of making the moth disappear, what we could do is delete that disappear method. Let's do this. Let's torture the moth a little bit in a very safe way, because this is a digital moth. Thankfully, it doesn't have feelings. We'll hit dot. We're going to have it move away from us. So when we get close to it, it's going to move away. So let's say moveBy. We'll move it along the x-axis. And so we'll move it, and we remember this is in meters, so we don't want to move it too far. Let's move it 0.1, so that'll be 10 centimeters. We won't move it up, although we could because it's a bug, and it does have wings. And it'll do that in 2 seconds. So now when we get close to the moth, when we're within 5 centimeters, the moth is going to move on the x-axis 0.1 meters away over the course of 2 seconds. Let's try running this. All right, there's our surface. I'm going to put the bug there. I'm going to start the scene. Now remember, you have to start the scene, because if we haven't started the scene, I don't think this camera when event is going to fire. So we'll move close to the moth. Oh, and there it goes. Moves away a little bit. If I get close to it again, it moves again. Let's see, I maybe have to back away past the 5 centimeters for it to get triggered again. Oh, there it goes again. So this is great. You could give this, you could build this playground, give it to your younger brother or sister, or older brother or sister, and have them chase around a moth around the house for the rest of the day. That might be fun. Maybe add in a button or another creature to have it come back. That might be kind of cool. Tell you what, let's do that. Let's create another bug. So up here is where we have our variables. So let's create another variable called moth2. We're going to get another flying bug. So we'll basically do the same thing we have here. We'll use the model type. Say model dot flying bug. We added the moth to the scene. Let's add, we're going to hit return. And we'll pick the scene again. Dot add, and we're going to add a moth 2. So now we've got moth 1 and moth 2 on the scene. There's moth 1. There's moth 2. If we start the scene, only moth 1 is flapping its wings because we don't animate moth 2 in here, so maybe we should do that. If we get close to moth 2 and we go right up in its face, nothing happens. But if we get close to moth 1, it takes off and heads over to moth 2. Okay, kind of cool. So let's add some more behaviors to our poor moth 2 who's just sitting there. Let's add, I'm going to tap at the end of the place where we animate the first moth. And I'm going to say moth 2 dot animate. Oh, not that one. Here, we'll do animate, and we're going to copy this one here. So we're going to say animation. So we're going to use dot flap. And let's hit run to see what we have. Now you may have noticed that I'm missing something. There's a difference between the two, which if you did, good job. Let's check it out. There we go. We're going to detect our surface. There we go. So, well, here. There we go. Now we got the surface. There's the first one. And here's our second one. Then we're going to hit start scene. Okay, there's our moth. That one's got its wings flapping. Now that one stopped. Because what we did was, and we didn't have, this is kind of tricky, because we didn't have, in autocomplete, we didn't actually have this comma repeats dot loop come up. So we're going to have to type that in ourselves. So let's delete that last parentheses. Let's bring up the keyboard. And we'll get a comma down here next to the M. Comma, space. We're going to do repeats. It's just another parameter on this function. You remember we talked about parameters a lot. I'll use a colon here to give it a value of dot. Now we can have loop, dot, loop, none, a number, or ping pong. Well, I'm always keen to try something new, so let's try out ping pong and see what that does for the animation. I'm going to then close the parentheses by tapping on this letter and dragging down to the left, up to the J. We'll hit run my code. There we go. There's our first one. There's our second one. Now if I start the scene, okay, we've got our two flying bugs flapping, and it looks like Moth 2 has started doing a slightly different animation. Because it's a little bit in a different time to the other one, and also has a little wiggle to its arm. So alright, well, you know what, that kind of gets the effect that I'm looking for. It's flapping the whole time, anyway. So now we can do one of two things to get both of them to move. We can either move Moth 2 when we get close to Moth 1, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would it be running around if we were near the other moth? Or we can add a new when handler on our scene's camera to use Moth 2 as the object here. So let's do that. Let's say scene dot camera. So we have to go find the camera. It's the final one there. Dot. We can use when again. When, and we're going to use Moth 2 for this one, is within, and maybe Moth 2 will make a little more skittish. So when we're within, not at symbol, when we're within 10 dot centimeters. So pick centimeters. And this is where we're going to have it do something. So we'll go get those braces like we did above here. So the braces are above the F key, so we'll tap on F and drag down to the right. All right, so now we're going to have Moth 2 perform an action. So Moth 2. Moth 2. Run. And our built-in action will do dot. Maybe we'll do the same thing. Move by, we'll have this one move up. So we'll have it move up 0.03 meters, nothing on the z-axis, and we'll have it do it over 4 seconds. Maybe less, 3. All right, so now we've got two objects on here where when we get close to one, it's going to move on the x-axis a little bit. When we get close to the other one, it's going to move on the y-axis a bit. So let's hit run my code and see what we have. All right, I'm going to tap and place the first one there, tap and place the second one there. When I start the scene, they're both looking fairly normal. When I get a little bit close to this guy, he takes off up. If I get close to this one, he takes off to the right. Oh, my right, his left. So there, I've built a scene where I can kind of move around my bugs. I can't get too close to my bugs because when I do, they'll move around. So think about how you might use that to use these moths as buttons and the location of the camera. Have the location of the camera determine what actions get taken. Have a little play around with that, build up a scene, take advantage of that proximity to the camera. You can also use the speak functionality, which is great. because maybe you can have it talk to you when you get up nice and close. That would be kind of interesting for a game. When you get close to the characters, they actually tell you their story. Have a play around with it. Hopefully we'll see you watching the keynote tonight for WWDC, and then we'll find out all about the sessions that are going on this week and when they're going on and when we can log in and check them out. I know they've got a very cool feature. They've got a very cool feature this year when you're watching the keynote presentations for each of the different sessions. Like we talked about the Reality Composer session that they ran in 2019. You're able to copy the code that they're exhibiting up on stage at that particular moment, which is a huge help when you're trying to replicate some of the cool functionality they're demoing on stage. So we'll talk about the schedule a little bit tomorrow for WWDC and see if there are any interesting sessions we might want to talk about as a group here on air. And then, in the meantime, keep playing around with your augmented reality, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.